Hare Krishna. Thank you so much again for inviting me to speak about a wonderful personality whose name is Devananda Pandit. Let me first offer my respectful obeisances to all of my spiritual master and our previous acharyas. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshur Unmilitan Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukham Karoti Vachalam Pangun Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande Shri Gurun Dinatananam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So we'll try to speak a little bit about Devananda Pandit. Now he's not probably as well known as many of our other acharyas, and yet he is there on our calendar, his appearance day and his disappearance day. So it's interesting to think, you know, how did they choose who goes on the calendar? Whose day do we observe and glorify? Of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Mahaprabhu's associates, why are there specific ones that are on the calendar? So we're wondering this for Devananda Pandit. What did he do? He didn't write any books, but there must be some very special significance because we are meant to observe his appearance and his disappearance. So from what I can understand is that Lord Chaitanya taught very essential, important lessons through him that are extremely relevant for any one of us who's trying to make some spiritual progress. So, you know, listen carefully to this story of Devananda Pandit and we will learn many things that are useful in our own daily life. So Devananda Pandit was from a very elevated Brahmin family. He lived in Kulia, which is the now present day called Navadvip. It used to be Kulia, and that Kulia came from Koladvip. That is the island of Koladvip. Somehow it turned into Kulia. And that's the western bank of the Ganges. So he lived there. Amongst many brahmanas, he was apparently very neighbors, more or less, with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's father, Maheshwar Visharada. Of course, he was in Vijayanagar, which is neighboring Kulia. And he was by profession, he was a reciter of Srimad Bhagavatam. Interesting. And he was a very great scholar, and he was an ascetic, and he was very detached from an early age. He was completely moral and pious, and he was exemplary in so many ways, following all the regulative principles. He was austere, he was gentle, he was deeply learned in the scriptures. And he spoke only from Srimad Bhagavatam. So due to all these good qualities and his erudite scholarship, he had many, many students, which would come daily and listen to his Srimad Bhagavatam. So one day, Srivas Pandit was in the neighborhood, and he's walking by, And he hears Srimad Bhagavatam being recited. And he just hears Bhagavatam and he's very attracted. So he just stepped into that ashram, being attracted by that sound vibration. It's interesting to note, what pulls us when we hear something. So this is Srivas. He's like, oh, Bhagavatam. He just was drawn. I'm going into that ashram. So what pulls us, when we hear things? What are we eager to hear? Is it when we hear some katha going on, we're just like drawn and pulled, oh, I want to hear that? Or, do we hear some gossip or some bad news about somebody and we just perk right up and we want to hear? So it's something, to observe in ourselves. What really pulls us? What are we attracted to? What sound vibration? So this is an example of Srivas Pandit. He just walked right into the ashram and he started listening to the sweet sound of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And hearing Bhagavatam, he just fell into a trance of ecstatic love. And he started to sigh out loud, and he started crying even out loud. And he wasn't making a show, but he just couldn't control himself. He was so ecstatic hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the students who were listening to Devananda Pandit, they thought, what is this guy? What, this rascal? He's making such a disturbance. And, they considered him a botheration. And so they just got up, picked him up, and tossed him out of the ashram onto the road outside. And so meanwhile, Devananda Pandit, he saw this. He saw this going on. You see when you're looking out at your class, what are the people doing out there? And these were his students. And he saw this and he did nothing. He did nothing to stop them. So he was responsible, according to Bhagavatam. So this is lesson number 1 from the story of Devananda Pandit, that a teacher is responsible to some degree for the behavior of the students. And there's an example of when the 4 Kumaras were angry with Jai and Vijay. Krishna said, if my devotee offended you, you could just lop off my arms as an atonement. Because whatever offense is committed by my servant, the master is responsible. This is how Krishna feels. So in that purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions that he said, if you love your guru, you should act to bring glory to him. And the misdeeds that are done by a disciple, it is a blemish on the image of the spiritual master. And we could see this with Srila Prabhupada in the early days in India, when we first opened the Krishna Balaram Mandir, and many devotees started to live in India. And Prabhupada was very, very strict in India, very strong, because he was, in the West, who knows what is a Vaishnava? So people don't really know when you're acting improperly. But in India, whether they follow or not follow, they know. And Prabhupada said, they're watching you. They're watching very carefully. And whatever you do, they will criticize me. So, again, this is another lesson there, straight away, that there are consequences, not just in our actions, what we do, but also in our inaction. It's not that Devananda Pandit did anything, but what he didn't do. So reactions are going to come, even if we don't feel it at the time, however great one may be. Look at Devananda Pandit, very pious. And however great you may be, every action or lack of action creates an effect. And this is just the simple science of how energy works. It's a science. And of course, the worst action or the worst deed, which brings the worst reactions, is mistreating a sadhu. As Krishna says that the sadhu is most dear, more dear than his own life. So, some severe reaction, it's just inevitable. So, what happened after this is that Devananda Pandita didn't feel anything, he didn't think anything at the time. He didn't notice that he'd done something wrong. But due to this offense, years later, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu revealed his Sankirtan pastimes, he was right there in the neighborhood, but he could not appreciate Lord Chaitanya. He disregarded him. He had no eyes to see. This very intelligent, very qualified, but he made an offense. And so he did not have the vision to see who was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So again, another point and lesson here is that vision, or what we're able to see, vision, it's a gift. It doesn't come by any material qualification. It comes by mercy. It does not come by erudition or scholarship. No matter how much you know, vision is given. It's mercy. You're allowed to see something. That's mercy. It's not because you did something to make it, No, it's mercy. And, the fact is that even if Krishna himself stands before us, without mercy, we're not going to see him. So people want to see God, and they want to see with their senses, but they have no eyes to see. See, even materially, we have such a tiny capacity. We're so small. It's said that we actually see 1% of the visible light spectrum. So we're not seeing 99% of what exists. We are so small. Yet, we become so proud about what I see or what is my vision. We don't see much. We're tiny. So therefore, the devotee is just, immersed in this mood of Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshur Unmilitangena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha, that I am in darkness. I think I'm seeing, but I'm just seeing a tiny little something, even materially. What to speak of spiritually? So this humble, constant prayer of Om Ajnana, this has to be our constant meditation. So anyway, later on, just one moment. Later on, after this incident, one day, this would be years later, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, or Nimai Pandit at the time, he walked by Devananda Pandit's ashram in Kulia, and he heard him reading the Srimad Bhagavatam in his eloquent and academic way. But Nimai, he became furious. He became so angry. Who is that rascal? He's speaking on Srimad Bhagavatam? He's just an offender to Vaishnavas. And I don't hear a single sound of devotional service come out of his mouth. This rascal, he has no right to speak Srimad Bhagavatam. And he said that anyone who recites Srimad Bhagavatam without glorifying devotional service is just an ignorant fool. He knows nothing. So at this very moment, he was so angry. The merciful Mahaprabhu was so angry that at this very moment, he said, I will stop this rascal. I'll rip his Srimad Bhagavatam to pieces. And he started to run towards Devananda Pandit's ashram, and the devotees that were with him just grabbed him, no, stop, this is not really a nice thing to do. But you just see how annoyed Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was. He is the most merciful, the most compassionate avatar, but some things make him angry. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he explains that those who are bereft of devotion, who forget their actual identity, and they become completely indifferent to the service of the Lord, when they identify this indifference as the ultimate goal of life, they become a source of profound irritation to the Lord. Whoa. Profound irritation to the Lord, these people. They upset him. So Devananda Pandit, he incurred the wrath of the Lord. So Devananda Pandit, an offender, he was an offender to Srivas Pandit. I mean, it's pretty amazing to think about. It wasn't, we would say, well, it's not such a big deal. But it was a big deal. What's a big deal in the Lord's eyes, that's what we have to know, not from our own perspective. And but Devananda Pandit, he not only he offended, but he also had another serious fault at the time. He was famous for his erudition, but he had no real devotion to Krishna. So he failed to understand that bhakti as the ultimate purport of Srimad Bhagavatam. According to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was a mumukshu. He was seeking in his heart impersonal liberation, moksha. So in his classes, Devananda Pandit glorified and praised dry austerities and renunciation. And in his discourses on Srimad Bhagavatam, he did not glorify devotional service. So he was a so-called scholar of Srimad Bhagavatam, but he didn't understand the meaning of Srimad Bhagavatam. Imagine, you're reading this book and you just do not get it at all. So another lesson, I think this is our third lesson here we're on that are all really important, that scholarship is just not enough. You cannot understand Shastra or life itself without devotion. You become blocked. Now, I had some experience of this. I have experience of this all the time, actually. But when I the first book that I got was Easy Journey to Other Planets. It was just a mimeographed copy. It wasn't even a book. I didn't even know where it came from. It just was next to my bed. And I thought, this is really important. I had this internal feeling that this is really, really something important. I mean, I read a lot. I really like to read. But when I tried to read it, it was like I just couldn't get into it, and I would pick it up again and again. And, in retrospect now, I was seeing, I was blocked. It's too impious. I read every Mayavadi book, and no problem. it's like I just couldn't enter in there. But later, I chanted Hare Krishna, I got prasadam, this and that. Then, the doors open. Okay, you can read it now. But, our intention and our mood in studying the Shastra, well, that determines the outcome. So, we can see this, like sometimes you notice, like according to our own conditioned nature, everybody's got their own conditioned nature that they struggle with. And according to that, things like jump out at us, like if you're a woman and then you read something about women, you're like, oh, and it really sticks in your brain, or you're like a brahmachari struggling with sex life, and then you read all these things about spitting on sex and, so you really, these things really, this is what you remember and this is what you hang on to. So according to our intention and our own struggles and, things jump out at us, and consequently we may also miss other things that are very, very important, but we just kind of skim over it, only hear one side of the story, depending on our conditioning. So anyway, later, Lord Chaitanya was walking with Srivas Pandit, and he happened to run into Devananda Pandit on the street. And he just approached him, went right up to him, and he said, "You were speaking Srimad Bhagavatam? What right do you have? The Srimad Bhagavatam is personified by the person Bhagavatam. And Srivas, he's a pure devotee, and you disregarded him. You couldn't understand his love. You offended him. If you offend a Vaishnav, you can never understand Srimad Bhagavatam. Just like if one eats food in order to be satisfied and nourished. We hear the Bhagavatam, for spiritual nourishment. But you recite Srimad Bhagavatam daily, yet you get no nourishment from it. No devotion, no real happiness." And then Mahaprabhu just stomped away, leaving Devananda Pandit, like quite shocked. This person younger than him, comes up and blasts him on the road. And Devananda Pandit, he just felt embarrassed. He thought, what's he on about? But he couldn't understand. And he just went on being this foremost teacher. And others thought him, great, but not Lord Chaitanya. So, again, the criteria is not what other people think. A lot of people were impressed by Devananda Pandit, but not Lord Chaitanya. So it's more important what the Lord feels than what other people think. So he was very unfortunate, Devananda Pandit. I mean, even though Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu danced right in Navadvip, near his residence, and he heard about him, and he saw him, his beautiful face to face. And he was even chastised by him, but not a tinge of faith came into his heart. Because an offense had blocked his heart, even the Lord's right in front of him, he had just no faith awakened. It didn't happen. So this is sad, and it's also scary. It's very scary. We have to be so careful about Vaishnava-aparadha. So this is really a big, I think the fourth lesson here from this story of Devananda Pandit, the terrible damage that can happen from Vaishnava-aparadha, that it can just block our heart and block our vision. So if we feel blocked, or if we feel unenthused, or we feel we're not progressing, then we have to look at what is the cause. What am I doing? The Lord is not happy with me. I'm blocked, So looking at that, and then we try to rectify. So anyway, later Lord Chaitanya took sannyas and he went to Puri. And then, not so long after that, Rakeshwar Pandit was traveling through Navadvip Dham, doing kirtan all over. And he was pure devotion personified. He had no material desires, and he was just immersed in ecstatic love. And it said that his dancing could enthrall even the demigods. He was just the embodiment of humility and devotion, and he was so dear to Lord Chaitanya that Lord Chaitanya said, wherever Vakreshwara, wherever he dances, I'm always there. I'm always present. He was famous for being able to dance for 72 hours. And Mahaprabhu said that if I had two wings like Vakreshwar, I could fly in the sky. So, this amazing personality, he came to Devananda Pandit's ashram somehow. Now, when Devananda saw him, something happened in his heart, and he just was so attracted, and he wanted to serve Vakreshwar. So, although he was, famous as an austere scholar, he began to render really menial services to Vakreshwar Pandit. So he would hold a stick, and when Vakreshwar, to keep the area clear when he's dancing, he would hold people back. And when Vakreshwar would, faint in ecstasy, Devananda would catch him, and with great respect and devotion, he would take the dust from his feet. So because of this sincere service to a great devotee, something wonderful happened to him. That faith in Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it just awoke in him. It just happened. And he deeply regretted and repented for his past. He felt terrible that the Lord was living in Navadvip, and I didn't even care for him, and I offended his devotees, and he really suffered regret. So here is our lesson, the next lesson, number 5, the power of association with a pure devotee. The power, it is so powerful that it can turn anyone's life around. We had this experience with Srila Prabhupada that, such fallen people, so very, very different from Devananda Pandit, really fallen people with not even any inclination towards, piety, but simply by the association of Srila Prabhupada, just by his presence, just by him walking into a room, he just awoke these feelings of devotion within the heart of practically animals. So this is the power of the association of pure devotee. And this can happen. This can happen for anyone, but we have to seek that association. So Devananda Pandit, he had a wonderful, wonderful change of heart. And, faith just filled his heart. And he was regretful, and he was humble. He felt humbled, and that is required. We need to feel humbled. So the Lord puts us in different situations. If we don't feel that way spontaneously, he gives us situations where we're forced to be humbled. Old age is one of them. We get so humbled. Because there are no arrogant saints, You're not going to become saintly without becoming humble. So after this, Lord Chaitanya, then he traveled to the south, and then he returned to Puri, and then later he attempted to go to Vrindavan. And on the way, he stopped in Vijayanagar at the house of Vijayavachaspati. Now, that's the brother of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And everyone heard, wow, Nimai Pandit's back, and now he's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So people flooded the place to try to see him. So in secret, Mahaprabhu had to move on, and he went to Kulia. And he stayed at the house of Madhava Das for 1 week. So then hundreds of people came to see him. Nimai's back, and now he's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's so great. And so many people realized his greatness at that time. And they felt sorry. Also, they came for forgiveness. Wow, we didn't know you were Nimai Pandit. We didn't know he was so great. So they felt sorry. And one of those who was sorry was Gopal Chappal. If we all know, he was also another offender to Srivas Pandit. And as a result of that, he got leprosy. And he tried to get forgiveness from Mahaprabhu long before. And Mahaprabhu was not inclined. Let you suffer 10 million births. He was so angry with him. But now that Gopal Chappal came, and he came in front of all these Kulia residents, everybody that was packing into the house of coming to see this wonderful Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So in front of everybody, Gopal Chappal was there in a very, very humble, very sincere mood. And he apologized and he said, I blasphemed your devotees, and now I understand my terrible mistake. And so Mahaprabhu, he was pleased. He saw he was sincere now. So he said, go to Srivas and get forgiveness. Go to Srivas Pandit. And he gave him very important instruction at this time. And he said, if one drinks poison with one's mouth, it will cause suffering and death. But if in the same mouth one drinks the nectar of immortality, it will not only neutralize and eradicate the effects of the poison, but it will give him immortality. So in a similar way, he said, criticism of a Vaishnava is poison. By speaking against the Vaishnava, one is drinking poison with one's mouth. But chanting the glories and the praises of the Vaishnava is like life-giving nectar. Therefore, you should, with that same mouth, praise the Vaishnavas and sing the glories of the Lord and chant the holy name. There is no other way. If you criticize and blaspheme a devotee, there is absolutely no yajna, no prayaschita, no sacrifice, no atonement that can save you from the offense. Only when you learn to appreciate and glorify the devotees can that offense be neutralized. And then you will attain the ultimate perfection of life. So now go, and wherever you may be, let your mouth praise the glories of the Vaishnavas, and then you will gain Krishna's mercy. So all the devotees, all the residents of Kulia were chanting Jai, 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 Jai to hear this instruction. And so this is lesson 6 from this. The glorification of the Vaishnava is the only way to counteract the effect of offenses. Blaspheming of devotees is the best way to be deprived of mercy, and glorifying and serving devotees is the best way to get the mercy of the Lord. That's why I do these classes. I've used my mouth so much in a poisonous way that, the only hope is to try to use it more for glorifying devotees as much as possible and get rid of all that poison. So then many other residents of Navadvip, they also came forward, and they're all asking for forgiveness, and they're feeling sorry. Now Devananda Pandit was there, and he was watching all of this. But he was like hiding in the back because he was feeling so ashamed and afraid. And he said, I'm so offensive. And he felt dirty. Now, I've also had a similar experience feeling that way in front of Srila Prabhupada, especially seeing Prabhupada the first time. I just felt so dirty and exposed and ashamed and fallen. And, you feel sorry, you want to hide. You want to hide, oh my gosh, look at me. But you can hide from that penetrating gaze of the pure devotee. And that gaze brings full ecstasy also. There's this mix of pain and pleasure. And so Devananda Pandit was just hanging back. I used to do that, hang in the back. Oh, I don't even want him to see me. And but Lord Chaitanya saw him, and of course, being Paramatma, he knew his intention, and he called him, and he understood his heart. And so he called out, "Oh, Devananda Pandit, you served and pleased Vakvishwar Pandit, and therefore you may come to me. I really want to see you." And he said, Vakvishwar is the embodiment of pure devotional service. He is so pure that Krishna is personally living within his heart. And therefore, wherever Vakvishvara is, all the holy places manifest there. And because you served him, and you have pleased him with sincerity, therefore Krishna's mercy will be upon you. We can take shelter in this also, because this is Srila Prabhupada. He took the holy places with him wherever he went. And somehow or another, whatever we are, whoever we are, if we can just continue to serve him, just try to serve him, eventually we'll get that mercy from Krishna. There's no doubt. So this, again, the next lesson, without receiving the mercy of a devotee, one cannot receive the mercy of the Lord. Therefore, this is really the most important spiritual principle, is to serve the Vaishnavas. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said that, actually this is the main point of the whole Chaitanya Bhagavat, that Vrndavana Thakur, he was just emphasizing over and over throughout the whole Chaitanya Bhagavat, the importance of service to the Vaishnavas. And of course, we know, Narottam Das Thakur, song after song, Chadiya Vaishnava Seva, Nishtara Payecha Keva. Who could possibly attain the perfection of Krishna consciousness without serving the Vaishnavas? It's simply impossible. So Devananda Pandit was so relieved and so happy, but he also said, but now, what should I do? Speaking from Srimad Bhagavatam is my life. Now, how should I do this? So Mahaprabhu instructed him very clearly, and he said, in the beginning, in the middle, and the end of Srimad Bhagavatam, there's only one subject, and that's pure devotion to Krishna. So just speak nothing else but the subject of bhakti. And there's only one goal of life, Krishna Prema, And there's only one way to achieve it, and that's through bhakti and devotional service. And in this way, you will understand Bhagavatam, and you will reveal the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam, and then your life will be perfect. And he continued that there are two types of Bhagavat: the book Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat. And that you understand the book Bhagavat by service to the person Bhagavat. So lesson number 8, I think, how to understand and how to speak on Srimad Bhagavatam. This is very clearly given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So then the Kulia residents, they were, listening to this, and, but Devananda Pandit's he's a great Pandit. And so many of them came forward and they said, but, we're just fallen householders. What is our duty to attain Krishna? And then Lord Chaitanya said to them, the path of bhakti is very simple. You'll attain ultimate perfection of Krishna prema if you just do 2 things. Just chant the holy names incessantly and serve the Vaishnavas. So simple, but difficult to actually enter into that, to actually do all of that, those 2 things in the right mood, in the right spirit. It requires great depth. It's simple, but it's not easy. But this is the principle. It's the profound formula for success. It was revealed right here. Chant the holy name sincerely, and be careful not to offend the Vaishnavas. So we can try to the best of our ability to take this principle very seriously. And you can see that Srila Prabhupada, he designed our program, our spiritual program, our sadhana that he designed for us, so that these things would happen automatically, daily. Immediately we wake up in the morning, and then there's the singing of the samsara prayers. So we're glorifying the Vaishnavas. And then we serve Tulsi Devi. And, again, another great devotee. And then we chant for some hours the holy name. And then again we glorify through Guru Puja. And then after we've purified ourselves to some extent, then we hear Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is all, very systematic way that's designed to keep us doing the right things in the right consciousness and moving forward. So back to Gopal Chappal, he really embraced everything that Mahaprabhu said, and he became a very, very great and famous devotee. I'm told, now I haven't confirmed it, but I have been told on more than one occasion that the devotee Devaki Nandana, that Gopal Chappal became Devaki Nandana through initiation. And Devaki Nandana is famous for writing these songs glorifying all devotees. And many Gaudiya Vaishnavas sing these songs every day. Understanding the importance of glorifying the Vaishnavas, they actually sing these songs. It's beautiful, beautiful song, wherein the glories of the devotees of Vrndavana, devotees of Navadvip, devotees of Puri, devotees who came before, and devotees that will come into the future. The whole song is just about, I just want to glorify all these personalities. So it's very beautiful. I keep thinking I should do that, do it every day. So, so much to learn from Devananda Pandit's story. I mean, he was famous for his mistakes, but also how he became famous for how he overcame them. This is a very instructive story for us, to help us to grow spiritually, so that we understand, what works, what doesn't work. Because generally we don't start out in the process, as being great souls. We all make lots of mistakes, but which we hopefully will lead to our growth. And so these stories, they are like roadmaps for us. They show us the way. How to grow in spiritual life, what's the right attitude, what to avoid, what to do. And eventually, we will better ourselves and thus make the world a better place, hopefully. So Devananda Pandit, he was a very special devotee, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, for Devananda Pandit, the fruit of service to the Vaishnavas was faith in Mahaprabhu's lotus feet. That he had many good qualities. I mean, he is like you couldn't find anybody like Devananda Pandit nowadays. He was very pious. But he lacked faith in Lord Chaitanya. But by the grace of Vakreshvara, this faulty intelligence was wiped away, and he became a believer in Lord Gaurasundar. So Devananda Pandit, he was considered greatly fortunate to have received the mercy of the Lord in the form of a chastisement. And these kind of pastimes, he's in no way an ordinary soul. In the Gaurganadesh Dipika, it's said that he was previously Bandari Muni, who was the Sabha Pandit who recited the Vedas in the court of Nanda Maharaj. So clearly, no ordinary personality. And so that place in Kulia, it's known as Aparadha Bhanjan Pat, the place where offenses are forgiven. So a good place to visit for all of us. I should maybe move over there. Anyway, many lessons on how to grow in spiritual life from Devananda Pandit. We learn first, that teachers are responsible for the behavior, just to recap a little bit. Teachers are responsible for the behavior of their students, that even inaction causes consequences. We saw the danger of pride in scholarship, and we saw the power of association and of glorifying the devotees. We've learned how to understand Srimad Bhagavatam. We've learned the two things, chant and serve. That this is the path to prema. And most important, from this story, what we can take away, the danger of Vaishnava-aparadha. At least we should take this away from this story, the serious danger of criticizing devotees, how detrimental it is. If we're feeling blocked or we don't feel our hearts shifting, or we're not feeling inspired, we need to search inside ourselves and understanding what perhaps I am making some offenses that are blocking me. And at least we should hopefully develop a healthy fear of making offenses. Even if we feel offensive or think offensively, at least we'd oh my God, I have to just shut up. It's just so easy to point the finger at others. And yet it is so difficult to really see our own selves and what are our own anarthas and what are the things we need to change and improve, And nowadays it's just, this frequent obsession with pointing out faults in others on social media, fearlessly, no fear. It's so dangerous. These stories tell us, even if we feel, we have bad feelings towards other, we should try to restrain ourselves. At least this is just even to be a decent human being. We could just aim for that, could I just be a decent human being even, And I'll finish with a quote that it's not from Bhagavatam, it's from Aldous Huxley. I hope no one takes offense of me reading from him, but it's such a pertinent quote that I would like to read it. So I have that here. He says, the effects which follow too constant and intense a concentration upon evil are always disastrous. Those who crusade not for God in themselves, but against the devil in others, never succeed in making the world better, but leave it either as it was, or sometimes even perceptibly worse than it was before the crusade began. By thinking primarily of evil, we tend, however excellent our intentions, to create occasions for evil to manifest itself. No man can concentrate his attention upon evil, or even the idea of evil, and remain unaffected. To be more against the demons than for godliness is exceedingly dangerous. Every crusader is apt to go mad. He is haunted by the wickedness which he attributes to enemies, but it becomes sort of a part of him. End quote. That's a powerful quote. So, this avoiding offenses. So what does it mean? Does it mean that we can't tell what's right or wrong anymore? We learn. It doesn't mean we lose our discernment or that we can't see when someone is behaving improperly. That's not what it means. But it means that we hold no malice or ill intent towards anyone. Like Srila Prabhupada, he always signed his letters, your ever well-wisher. We are meant to be the well-wishers, even of evil people, of demons, of offenders, of whatever. They're part of Krishna. We are all part of Krishna. Even if I don't like somebody, Krishna loves them. Krishna's parts and parcels. And even Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he said that, I wish nothing but the highest good for my greatest enemy. Wow. We cannot imitate these things, but we can aspire, we can hope that we could one day have such magnanimous feelings in our hearts. And at least minimally, we should fear being offensive. It's difficult. In Kali Yuga, it just comes so naturally to just offend. But, it's important to cultivate a desire to develop the heart of a Vaishnava. So we offer respects to Devananda Pandita for teaching us so many things in his pastimes. He was a most fortunate devotee, and by studying his life, we can understand so many things that are relevant to our own practices and our efforts in trying to become Krishna conscious. All glories to Devananda Pandita. Hare Krishna.